Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to all our listeners who are joining us today from different parts of the world. I'm Rohitash Agarwal from Everest Group, and I'm very glad to welcome you all to the episode 4 of our Conversation with Leader series. Uh, I'm joining in today from North India today. I'm at my hometown in Punjab. It's getting chilly. We are at the onset of winters. So glad to be doing this at a good time in the evening. And I'm very excited today about this, possibly the last LinkedIn Live of this year. This is the fourth this year. So we are happy to have come this far. And as you all know, we love to talk about GBS. We are very excited about this model. And the topic today is also pretty interesting. And just taking a step back to reflect on some of the basics of the GBS model, right? There are there are only two things that we expect GBS leaders to do well. One, they must deliver on the scope. They must deliver on the scope with efficiency, effectiveness, and create value. And second, they must help their stakeholders. These could be enterprise stakeholders, business stakeholders, different users. But ultimately, GBS leaders need to help these stakeholders adapt and embrace the GBS model. As we reflect back on over 2 decades of this model's maturity, the first part has been done really well. It is evident in the success of the model. But as we look deeply, the second part, the stakeholder part, has been relatively challenging. Uh, we have been talking about change management topic for a while. It has been of interest to us. I'm very glad that few months back we at Everest Group collaborated with Deborah Cops from Sourcing Change to conduct first of its kind investigation on this industry, and we really wanted to analyze what is the state of the play when it comes to change management in GBS. Again, we have a very good panel today. Hopefully, looking forward to a great discussion in the next 60 minutes. So we have Deborah Kops from Sourcing Change. She is one of the principal authors. She'll lead the discussion today. She doesn't really need an introduction. She's very well known, uncrowned queen of the GBS world. I'm very fortunate to be working with her and learning from her. And as you'll see, the study findings will say a lot of unsaid things about what she brings and what she covers. Joining me and Deborah today are two very seasoned practitioners, and thanks to them for agreeing to make time to share their point of views on this topic with us. We have Cindy Gallagher. Cindy runs the finance shared services for USA Today, a media company. She also acts as a controller for the organization. We are also joined by Sam Barani from Fresenius Medical. He is building a new GBS organization, and he's also playing a double role where he is one of the transformation leaders for the enterprise. Cindy, Sam, once again, thank you for joining us today. Really glad to have you on. I know you are both very passionate about change management, very strong advocates, how organizations need to invest in this. So, really looking forward to hearing from your experiences. Before I turn it over to Deborah, a few housekeeping items. This is a live discussion, so welcoming once again all our listeners from different parts of the world. I'm seeing that we are having people from Florida, Amsterdam, UK, many different parts of the world. Good to have you all join in. Do comment, ask questions, share your perspectives by commenting on this. And during the discussion, as different topics come up, just ask your questions. Feel free to do that. We also recently, as I said, did a very extensive study on this topic. We analyzed 58 GBS organizations across the world. That research is coming along nicely. We are giving finishing touches to the final report, which will be ready in the next couple of days. So you will see a link in the chat window where you can request for a complimentary copy of this analysis. Make sure that you subscribe, and we'll get back to you with the report. With that, over to you, Deborah.
Thank you, Rohit. Everyone on the call shows up in this industry, participates in either GBS or shared services discussions, events, etc. And when I look back at one of the topics that threads through about every discussion we have, it's change management. It is probably the single most headache factor that GBS practitioners and their providers deal with today. And it's no surprise. I mean, when we move to a GBS or shared services model, everything changes. Technology changes, relationships change, the people who do the work changes, the location change. And I mean, fundamentally, GBS is synonymous with change. And it's pretty fair to say that it's not a one-off proposition. We see mandates change. We see leadership change. We're always going through change. One of the challenges that we believe is that nobody really knows what good looks like. Nobody knows what the state of play looks like. So the study that Rohit mentioned that will be released very shortly really unpacks what GBS change management looks like today. If you believe that we need to baseline in order to move on, this is the study that everyone needs to understand. Well, what did we do? We analyzed the GBS change management practices in 58 leading organizations, and you can see what the demographics look like. We're very pleased at the level of participation in the study, and we had follow-up interviews. So while we may not have been able to examine every aspect of change management in GBS, we have a pretty good picture of key indicators. So as you can see, we're pleased with the legitimacy of the response, and more importantly, the extent to which the industry has embraced this study. So let's look at another slide, just giving you a teaser about the report. If we could talk about what we actually saw. And in one page, what we saw is that 75% of our respondents said, look, change management is critical. It really fuels GBS success. But what we found, and it was actually quite depressing, is that it's not a given. And when we looked at the organizations that responded, we were actually surprised at those who are bantered about as leaders in this industry. Change management was not necessarily a priority for them. We found that it was not viewed as a systemic activity. It was basically, in most organizations, wrapped around a particular project. We're putting in service now, we're doing a transition, rather than looking at the systemic change that GBS organizations represent. We didn't see it as usually part of the GBS strategic footprint. And it is not, as a part of that, it was not usually positioned at the top of the house as a transversal, hitting everything that the GBS organization does. We saw a lot of FUD in how internal GBS teams embrace change management. There's a view that it's the change management ladies, and unfortunately, that's the view, who deal with the change. They're the ones who put the Band-Aid on. So we saw internal resistance in the GBS to change management. We saw a lack of talent, and our respondents believe that there isn't enough talent in this market. We didn't see methodologies. There's no prevailing methodology. Yes, there's a grab for ADKAR or Cotter, but fundamentally, there is no prevailing GBS methodology dealing with the change that GBS represent. And last but not least, how do you gauge the effectiveness of GBS change management? And it's the happiness factor. If the stakeholder is happy, change management is working, and we think there's so much more than that. So what actually is change management in GBS? If we can really understand, most of our respondents see it as a tell to diminish resistance to the model. Certainly valid, but when you're telling, you're not necessarily changing. 30% see it as strategic, and only 16% see it as systemic. So, is it, if you're a glass half full person like I am, there's a lot of scope to change. last but not least, what we saw is we saw 4 different ways. If we can look at the next slide, please. 4 different ways we aggregated responses to identify 4 patterns. We saw people who were head scratchers. They've yet to establish a competency. And in this case, we saw a lot of folks who double-hatted transition managers or PMO folks really don't believe in the power of change management. We saw folks who were crawlers, who are gradually establishing a discernible competency. Folks who see change management are starting to drink the Kool-Aid and really understand that change management is a game changer for the organization. And then we did see a number of what we would call institutionalists who establish the competency, who really embed change management in everything they do. So very, very brief highlights of some of the findings of the report. Let's get this party started, and let me throw out a question to Sam and Cindy. As you saw, 75% of respondents said change management is absolutely critical on a scale of 1 to 10, a 9, 10. But yet, if you look at what we were able to unpack, it's kind of dark ages. Why do you think change management is so critical for GBS? Come on, jump in here.
Cindy, you want to get started?
Sure, yeah, I'll jump in there. Deborah, I think it's a really interesting question because for as long as GBS has talked about change, we've talked about transformation, we've talked about digital automation. Every single thing we do as GBS leaders is about change and it is about growth. That would lead me to believe that change management should be threaded through our DNA as GBS leaders and threaded through the DNA of our teams. So the question on why is that not true? Why is change management become just project-based is a head scratcher to me. And the only thing that I can ascertain or come to believe here is that we have created a GBS culture that is project-based. So we have a plan, we have a playbook, we execute on a project, and there's change management within that project. And then instead of threading that competency through, project ends and we jump into the next project. And the GBS leaders then create a change management program around that project. Are we not measuring ourselves in the right way anymore? Have we been too metric driven for so long on very specific metrics that we haven't elevated our metrics, our SLAs to consider how to thread change management throughout? I think it's very telling that times need to change in the GBS industry based on the research that you and Rohit have uncovered that change management is not today threaded throughout the competencies of a GBS organization.
So Sam, is it a case of not seeing the forest through the trees?
Yeah. You're building a playground, or you're building something with Legos. And you build one part of the wall, right, to the Lego building. You finish that wall, and you flip the page in the Lego instructions, and you move on to the next. And it's not until you're done and you step back and you can see the whole thing, but you're not taking the time to think about how each of those pieces go together. You're just flipping the page of the playbook and moving on to that next set of instructions. And so stepping back to see the forest through the trees is incredibly important.
So is it fair to say the velocity of change is getting in the way of change management?
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think I would add to that, Cindy, this is kind of my observation as well. I think there is also scope factor. You see some of the GBS leaders come in and they say, I'm only responsible for these activities, or I only do finance, or I only do HR, or whatever. And it's interesting as they're thinking about change management, they a lot of time, to your point, focus on the project or focus on the scope. Or if it's outside of my scope, I'm not there yet, or somebody else is managing it, versus just kind of stepping out and say, kind of everything is connected. Doesn't matter your scope is this, but how do you actually bring your stakeholders along and make sure that they are the champions for you? right? You hear often a lot about, not having the right champions in the company, and you hear a lot about not having a lot of investment, or GBS maybe is not a priority, it's not a strategic function for the business. And then when you kind of really go under the layers and ask why, get to the bottom of it, a lot of time you actually get to what Cindy was talking about. It kind of roots from focusing one area, kind of having this view of, I need to manage this scope or this project or these stakeholders, versus really stepping out of it and say, maybe not there today, but what is my tomorrow? How do I think about it from enterprise perspective? How do I think about it from the C-levels perspective? How do I think about it from the customer's perspective? Which completely changes the view that you have, right? I think, and a parallel to this is transformation. One of my favorite questions sometimes people ask is, do you think transformation is a temporary project, or is it an ongoing thing? And just by the nature of somebody asking you, do you think transformation is something that's going to last 2 months or 3 months? That tells you how they think about it, right? And it comes back to, I think, level setting of what's your definition of transformation, which here also, what's your definition of change management? And how do you take that definition, which I see often that the understanding is, yes, change management is very important. But when you ask them, but what do you mean by change management? You often see them described as communication, which is not change management, right?
So I think what you're saying is, here we think about processes end to end. I mean, everybody is going to, the nirvana for GBS organization, end to end process, but we focus so narrowly. We're not end to end on the change that we create for the organization. That's how did I question? I mean, most people come to change management, get religion because something screwed up. Let's call it what it is. Yeah. You may have been, what are you, psychology majors in university? Did you lose your job because the change didn't go well? What caused you all to be converts to the GBS change management cause?
So I've said to our CFO here at Gannett, who I've worked with for a number of years, even prior to Gannett, but I said to him a couple of months ago, when I retire, I want to come back and be a business psychologist. I love to think about it and talk about it and read about the ways of the mind, how people think about things. So Deborah, I think you kind of said it flippantly, kind of made a joke, right? About
I'm always flippant.
are we psychologists? But I think there's an element of that with the leaders who we've seen be successful, the leaders we want to continue to work with. They do take the time to understand how humans work, the ways of the human mind, and how change management plays a role in that. Sam, you mentioned a comment about change management being just about communication, and it absolutely can't be, right? It has to be about the strategy. It has to be about, how do you motivate the team around you? How are you creating your playbook and executing on that playbook? I think all too often, and this includes my lovely HR partners, I'll include them in this conversation as well, where we label people as a change champion for a project. And then that project ends and the label goes away. And because the label goes away, people don't think they need to act that way anymore.
Yeah, I think I love the comment about the label. It is, one of the things that we talk about a lot internally is change management is not a job that someone just does. Mm-hmm. Everyone owns change management. You can't just say, it's not my job to do change management. It's you three, Deborah, you said the change management ladies, you three or you four, that's your job to do it, right? Or, hey, project manager, have you thought about this? I think it's really coming back to the definition of what it is, I think, that we define as change management, right? Is it communication? No. But really thinking about, okay, what is our change strategy? What are our change champions? How do we think about our methodology? And really stakeholder management, so on and so forth, right? But once you define it, then really thinking about, how do you enable the organization to actually use it on their day-to-day activities, rather than thinking about it when there's a special project, or thinking about it when something is broken, or somebody is coming in and say, I am resistant to your project, right? It is kind of embedded in everything they do. And I think that is, to me, that is the pivotal. There are two pieces in my mind. One is aligning of what does it even mean and educating your own team and leadership and your customers to what does it mean when we're talking about change management. And that's kind of elevation of the topic. But I think more importantly is, but how can you make it into your day-to-day activities and really have this shift from change management to Cindy's point is on this project or it was only communication to, but how do you do that? And that's, I think, some of the ways that we are addressing it is we are trying to play it backwards. So your question about how did we get it, how did I at least get into this is, I see a lot of symptoms, right? Resistance, lack of investment, not being on board with something, going very slow. And when you really dig into a lot of these, I don't know, most of the times you come down to we haven't done any or we have done very little change management, right? And it's you people are going for the symptoms and they're like, oh, you have a headache, let me give you aspirin, rather than why do you have the headache and what's driving it.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. I mean, we don't tend to meet people where they are. We look at a GBS model as, what about this don't you get? It's going to save money. It's going to free up time to focus. It's going to do all these great things. We think people relate to change intellectually, and it's fine. But as one of our participants today, just, and I'm assuming you're from the Netherlands, although that's a change assumption I shouldn't make, basically says it's about changing DNA, which takes a very long time. And we spend a lot of time focusing on the here and the now. As Cindy says, the project. We don't take a long-term view. And how does an organization change culturally to adopt a new way of working?
We have to make it important again, right? As GBS leaders, Deborah, I think that's our role. We have to help our team understand and start to embed the characteristic of change management. I wonder how many folks listening and how many people that you researched, Deborah and Rohit, feel that change management is more of an HR function than a business function like ours, right? To me, it is a business function and a characteristic that we need to own, but I don't know that that is one that we have groomed or pushed throughout the organization. And it always, not always, it often starts at the top. And I think in this case, it absolutely starts at the top. We have to find ways to incent people, to reward people, to frankly thank people for being change managers and to thank people for holding this post for us and driving it through the organization. And I don't think that exists today.
Well, again, we think that it's the change lady and the comms lady who are going to take care of it. And I think you're absolutely spot on. We don't put it in everybody's objectives.
And how easy would that be? Right.
Well, you have to be able to measure it. I think that's part of the challenge. How do you know that you're getting an ROI from change management? How do you know that? It's not smiley faces.
Right.
I think there is a gap there. So, Cindy, you asked an interesting question. How many think this is a HR problem or a HR job to do, right? I think it goes back to what Sam said. How do you define change management? And because of the very narrow view of what that means, somebody's parking it under a communication function, somebody's parking it as a HR function, and somebody's just, making it a very
transition function.
project-oriented role, right? But it goes back to, you said, we have to make it important again. One of the key challenges we discovered is that a lot of leaders are not appreciating what they are missing by not doing it the right way, because they are learning to live with a certain problems and they believe all these things will happen as we evolve, we go through transitions. So if I may ask you, when you say we have to make it important, are there some learnings from what has worked for you? How do you really make people appreciate what they are missing, what the organization is missing when they're not doing it right?
Yeah, well, it's a great question and a hard question all at the same time, right? I do think there's an element where we should push change management and the characteristics of a persona, if you will, of a GBS leader and a GBS teammate through our annual OKRs, through our annual goals. What are the learnings? How do we expect our individuals to grow? It can't just be about smiley faces, to your point, Deborah, and it can't just be about checking the box on a training or a brown bag. learning lunch and learn type of session. But it can be, come the end of the year, how many more projects were you able to get through because of strong change management that was threaded throughout the organization? How much productivity improvement did you start to see? What are your customer service metrics like because you were engaging every day in a change management type of program?
And what is the decline in change requests? Because you got it right the first time because you listened.
Right. You listened. Right. You listened, you asked questions, you understood the motivating factor behind that change request. And quite possibly your attrition may be lower.
Yeah. But right now, I think we do not have in this industry a formula for measuring the impact of change management. And the old saw, you don't manage what you don't measure, may be absolutely apt here. We don't do it because we don't know what the implications are. We think it's just the happiness factor, or we're ticking a box because we told someone that something was changing. That's not change management.
Yeah, I would say, I think two things from my perspective in kind of making it important again or bringing it to the front. First of all, we need to invest where we say something is important. Talk is cheap, right? You go around and you say change management is really important. And it's one of the, I don't know, as you said, 75% said it's 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 important. But I would be curious to, from the audience or, kind of the results seeing, but where do they actually invest for the change management people? Are they reporting directly to the head of GBS? Are they reporting to one of the C-levels? Are they like 5-6 level down in the organization under HR and nobody sees them? You can very quickly see how important it is by kind of seeing what is the investment. Is it something that is strategic across the enterprise, looking at organizational change as well as project change, as well as kind of getting into the people side of it, or is it, as we said, there's 3 people who are just kind of doing it for a specific role. So I think
you bring up a really, really, really good point. One of the things we asked our respondents was, what capabilities do you look for in change managers? I could have stripped off the name, the category change management, and I would have put in transformation. It's the same capability. What's so funny is we don't want to pay for those people.
Yeah.
So, and we don't want to give them career paths. One of our respondents in the report, a very large global CPG company, says, we will not be able to attract change managers until there's a career path. And where do change managers go? Same profile, capability profile as a transformation leader. We respect transformation leaders, but change management is still a tell. So to some extent, we shoot ourselves in the foot. We want something, but we're not prepared to pay for it. We're not prepared to create career paths, not only within a GBS, but also outside of a GBS. And as a result, one of the things we detected in the report is that we now have a lot of folks get their change management from providers, which we could talk about. I think that's kind of odd. Why would you have your outsourcers do your change? Because their change and your change are 2 different types of change. But we lean very heavily on interims because we see it as a project. We're putting it as, S/4HANA, we need a change manager for a couple of years. As a result, these people are managing their own careers outside of the enterprise because they don't see a career within the enterprise, and they become expensive. When there's demand and a very short supply, what happens? So to some extent, GBS organizations have created this talent conundrum.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the flip side of it, Deborah, unfortunately, I at least see, we all have heard that the latest rounds of layoffs in many companies. A lot of them start with change and comms people. It's shocking to me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's cut the cost, and they just find change and comms people, and they just like, you all go because you're a nice to have function. So that you can see the flip side of it as well. But you're absolutely right in terms of we want something but we don't want to pay for it, or we want something but we don't really value it strategic. So I would say let's kind of step back up. If you really want to do it right, you do want to put the investment where you know how to elevate this, right? And as Cindy mentioned, the measurements are, you can easily kind of see the performance of a program. Even I go to the tactical level. Let's start with the maybe non-believers or half believers. You can start see the performance of a program that had change in comms on it versus they didn't. You can see it goes faster, it's more efficient, you have more cheerleaders, you have better customer satisfaction, you have less attrition, you like all the success factors just multiplies, right? And if you take that and say, now I want to do it across multiple programs, now I want to do it for this division, now I want to get it and make it an enterprise. So you can kind of start piloting and expanding, but that's maybe to, for those of us who are maybe on the call or listening, and you're like, no, but I believe it. My boss doesn't. My leadership doesn't. And I think that's kind of where you start. I mean, I would say I'm in a new role, and we started having change management conversations at the board level, not just this project, that project. Like step back and say, what are we doing at the enterprise? Let's have conversation investment on what it is that we need to do at the board level. So maybe not everybody can start there, but you got to start kind of elevating it to this is a strategic capability that needs all the attention as transformation versus down buried in the organization.
Well, Sam, you're a new build GBS, so you have the access to the board. Most GBS organizations that are culprits basically are either reboots or they've been running for some time. It really starts with the GBS leader.
Yeah.
And, even if an organization can't invest in a full-fledged change management organization from the get-go, there's an incremental way to get there. And number one is help the GBS staff understand they are responsible for change too, as Cindy talked about. So there are ways to get there, but it starts with the leader.
Deb, I'm curious, when you and Rohit, for you too, as you were conducting your research, did you see a difference in the types of companies or in the culture of the companies? You had a slide earlier where you had the four different personas, four different types. Right. Is there a marked difference between those that fall into an institutionalist, it's embedded, versus those that are just crawling along?
Well, it's funny. The institutionalists are typically larger. And for those of you who really like numbers, read this report. It's 45 pages of sheer number delight, but with some provocations too. But it's typically folks that are more global, mm-hmm. who have been around longer. We did see a correlation between the embracing of digital and the embracing of change. But you'd be surprised mm-hmm. how many head scratchers are companies that have been at this for a while and are global. But typically they see the value, they've been at it longer, they're more mature, more global, but not always. And this is what was such a conundrum for us when we analyzed the data. There are well-established GBS organizations just don't want to do it. Not too long ago, I had a participant say, tell me how we tell the GBS leader that we need to invest in change. And it's a GBS that just clicks along every year. So yes, more advanced, more mature, more global, but not always.
And Deborah, a couple of other interesting things that clearly stood out were, one, relatively European organizations were investing more in some of the change management competences. And second, in terms of the remit of the GBS, those who were primarily focused on cost reduction for the enterprise,
that's right,
were less invested in building the change management competency as against those who were pivoting on value. In fact, in the last few minutes, we have spoken about investments a few times, right? So just one data nugget. About 2/3 of the GBS leaders who responded could not tell what is their budget for change management, how much do they spend. And those who did respond, a large portion of that had a very small budget, less than 1% category. So there is that clear data very disappointingly clearly shows how much we are lacking in investments in this space.
Yeah, no, thanks for reminding me. There were the reams of data. We also found a correlation that those who are focused on cost containment focus primarily on communications, not on changing hearts and mind, basically telling people you will do this and you will like it. And one of the things we've seen is that good change management programs always have an ask of their stakeholders. They ask them for their opinion. They ask them to do something. They ask them to co-invest. They ask them to engage. Telling is not change.
Deborah, let me pull up question from the comments here. Rochelle is asking us if how do we incorporate change management into career pathing, right, as an essential skill. So we talked about building change management careers, but how do you incorporate change management into career pathing?
Well, I think there are two ways of doing this, and I'd love Sam and Cindy to pull in. Number one, understand that it is a career, that it is a capability. Acknowledging that it's a capability, I think, is correct. But one of the things we saw in the data is that career change managers need to go somewhere. They're just because they're very good at something doesn't mean they want to stay boxed. They have to see a path into other GBS roles. They have to see a pathway into the rest of the organization. And I think one of the things that surprised us is that so few major organizations really invest in change management beyond organization design. There is a movement, and a little bit of a bright light here of change management capability honed and incubated in GBS being exported to the rest of the organization. That's great, but it has to be embedded within GBS career paths and also without GBS career paths. But what do we have in change management? We have manager, senior manager, director. What does that mean? How do we expand the capability base beyond basically putting lipstick on a pig? And that's what we do in this industry. I know that sounds harsh, but it's very graphic.
Can't be a dead end, right? Cindy, Sam?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that, Deborah, is that I do believe change management can and should be a career path. I do agree that there is very tight relations with change management and transformation. Anyone who has a very long career in transformation, whether they realize it or call it this or not, they are also doing change management typically. But I will add that I think that every GBS leader needs to have change management as part of what they do, right? As part of how they lead, part of how they motivate and coach their teams, how they interact with their customers. I think we need to have career pathing from just a general GBS career growth that includes elements of change management from analysts all the way up to
That's right.
senior vice presidents.
That's
I
right.
couldn't agree more. I think if we want to see the change in the change management, if you want to see things actually be different, I do think we need to really kind of reinforce the fact of everybody owns change management,
Yeah.
right? And if you think about just career pathing in general, right? So Rochelle, great question. If I think about career pathing in general, if you start junior and the more senior you become, the more important it is for you to maybe kind of move away. When you're junior, early in your career, it's very important to have the technical skill set, get the job done, all of that. And then soft skills are a percentage of your overall performance. As you move up your career, that soft skill actually increases, right? So your ability to lead, your ability to influence, sense of empathy. I think change management exactly fits in that category. So when you actually build, you look at someone who is, you get manager and above, you look at how you measure them and you say, this part of your job, you hit the deadlines, you deliver the metrics, great. But that's only a certain percentage of your overall performance. The other part of it is how, not what you do, but how you do things. How are you being perceived? What's your relationship with the stakeholders? What's your brand? How do you lead? How do you influence? That's capabilities and traits of a change leader, right? And if you kind of build that into the performance of everyone within your organization, small doses,
That's
junior,
right.
higher doses, then everybody is like, okay, this is not for them, it's for all of us. And you kind of really fundamentally or systematically start to change the conversation, right? And of course, you have it for people who are doing that as full-time job as well, of kind of making that career path for them. But I am strong believer that you want both. Otherwise, again, it becomes a they gotta do change, not me. It's I don't have to worry about it,
Right,
right?
right, right. No, I think that's right. In fact, one of the things we looked at was the size of change management teams. And the predominant model is hybrid. Let's have some dedicated resources, and then we'll get resources either from interims, maybe consulting firms, maybe elsewhere in the organization. This is not about the size of the team. Obviously, it has to be sized appropriately, but it's not about empire building. It's about distributing the responsibility throughout the organization. The only time we typically see very focused change resources, again, is projects. And as one of our participants, Ramesh Krishnan, is saying, that's the way we budget. We budget for change management around projects. So as a result, we don't see it as something that's endemic in the whole organization.
What would happen if we took those individual project budgets? We have, I think he's right, right? There's project, there's a change management. What if we took and ripped apart the budget for all those projects and just said, this is now going to be across the top, meaning it's part of the GBS budget, not part of a project budget. I wonder if that would change perceptions or way of acting.
I dare you, Cindy. I
Maybe.
dare you, Cindy. No, look, the money's there. We know intuitively that it costs money not to do this.
Yeah.
But the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, to quote Dickens. Let me ask you both. You've seen the 4 personas. You've seen head scratchers, crawlers, etc. What are you? Sam, you haven't been around long enough to be an institutionalist yet.
No,
Are you a crawler, a head scratcher, a game changer, or an institutionalist?
I would say, given the fact that I haven't been around long enough in this organization to have built it and see success, I think I would say I consider myself a game changer in terms of we are aggressively investing in this. And Cindy, it's funny you mentioned this. We actually, when I joined, one of the first things I asked was, like, first of all, do we have this capability? Second of all, where do we have it? And literally, that was the exact conversation we had of, why do we have 10 different teams in 10 different places? Can we pull them all in together and connect them all to this community of practitioners, as well as a centralized place that actually goes across the enterprise for enterprise transformation? And that's how we elevated the conversation, right? The good news is we had agreement between the leaders that this is very important, and they're like, you know what? I want more of it. I don't care if it's within my team. I just want more of it. So, but it is kind of actually what we did of looking at every little piece and say, instead of 20 different people or organization building it, why don't we actually kind of have it as one centralized strategic pillar? So we are trying to invest in it. It is very much important. We raised it, as I said, all the way to our board of why we need it and how important it is to actually accelerate our transformation as an organization. And we're not there yet to become an institutionalist, I would say, and have been there, done that, seen the success. I've done that in my career multiple times. I have other stories from prior lives, but I do feel like we are at least going about it the right way. So it's that's one thing that makes me feel better today, that we actually have the attention and we are making the investment, versus the first few months was more of education, bringing awareness, and kind of getting the leaders on board.
Cindy,
I feel like we're in a similar place. So when I joined Gannett at the end of 2020, we had several major projects happening. We were outsourcing for the very first time. We were remediating a material weakness, and we were integrating legacy Gatehouse New Media and legacy Gannett. We were integrating them into one. A lot of change management, as you can imagine, was needed, but it was done in silos. And even to the point of the BPO at first was, Deborah, to your point, provider wanted to lead the change management, and we had to step back, and we did take a very different approach. We leveraged them as partners because I felt it was important for them to come along on the journey, but the strategy of change management needed to be driven by us and needed to be based on our culture and what our teams needed. Fast forward 2 years, and we are now talking and we are actively talking about how do we take what the GBS organization has done, what the IT organization has done, what the strategy organization has done, and layer that over the top, right, of the entire enterprise from a strategy transformation and change management perspective. So I feel like we are in the middle of that journey of the four personas. We are certainly not to the point of being institutionalists yet. Would love to be able to get there. We'll see how quickly we can make that happen. But we're certainly not head scratchers either, right? We believe in change management. We believe that we have to talk and coach and show the value of change management, measure successes of change management, and ultimately infuse that through the body of our entire enterprise.
What?
Deborah.
Go ahead, Rohit. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, just on the personas, something very interesting that popped up in one of the conversations during this research is that while, of course, as Sam and Cindy reacted, you can largely identify yourself with one of the personas, but also as some of the practitioners started reflecting on it, they could start thinking about their stakeholder, individuals or groups, and put them into different personas as well. So even within an organization, some parts of the organization may be operating differently and kind of thinking about change management differently. And that adds an interesting insight on what you need to do to improve the current state. So that was quite different. Is that even if largely organization is a game changer, there could be some who are really head scratchers, and then there are some who are really supportive. So how do you think differently about them?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Rod. One of the things we've seen is that some of the biggest resistance to change management, it comes from GBS organizations. So Sam and Cindy, get your folks in line. Make them drink the Kool-Aid. It's pretty important. We only have a few more minutes with our audience. If you had the opportunity to take out a clean sheet of paper, and Sam, you've had this opportunity recently, but you've learned even in less than a year you've been in role. What is the one thing, one change you would make to the way you approach change management in your GBS organizations?
I would say from my end, it's important to have a plan for the plan. So, to your point of get your team on board, you come as a new leader, you have a plan, you've seen it, been there, and you got to bring your team along. You got to actually go through your own change management to get people to understand why this topic is important so that they can be your allies, they can be your partners. So it's an interesting way of saying it, but have a change plan for the change management that you wanna implement, right? Because that itself is a process. You gotta get a crew, you gotta get some momentum going, and then you can kind of start changing the organization. So that's what I would
have a plan.
I think that's a great way to say it, Sam. We should not think that everybody sees change and the need for change management in the same way. I think we need to continue to talk about it. I think across the industry, we need to have more conversations like this. I think we need to really develop the right relationships with our direct reports and all the way throughout all of our team, our entire organization, to make change management visible, to make it really pointed. to make it a factor in our goal setting. Otherwise, the need gets lost and forgotten.
Yeah, and I think that has, a lot of that is training. Suzanne from AkzoNobel has basically said, it's obvious that AkzoNobel democratizing change management because they train, for example, project managers.
Yeah.
A great topic, much more dialogue to be had. Rohit, I'm going to turn it back to you to close us up.
Hey, thanks, Deborah. Sam, Cindy, this has been a very insightful discussion. I hope our listeners, found this valuable use of their time. We had a lot of people join in, comment, engage. So thanks to all of them. Just a couple of reminders. One, the you can use the link in the chat window. We'll post it again just now to request for a copy of the report. So make sure you register and you'll get a copy by end of the week. Second, if there are any comments, any questions you want to keep posting in the chat, do that or reach out to us directly. We'll be happy to engage further. Thanks to some very active listeners who have been sharing insights from their experiences as well. I think that is truly helpful. I'll just say one thing, just call out another comment from Ramesh Krishnan, one of our listeners today, who is probably, Deborah asking us to be a little more kinder is that probably when we look at it in a consolidated manner it might not seem much, but in a distributed manner a lot is happening. So there is that foundation. It just needs more program, more structure needs to come together and then deliver the value that it has potential to, probably, right? So hopefully this research will be insightful to the practitioners, and when we look back in a few months, in a couple of years, we hope that the needle moves a little bit. It's a step change, right? But really excited about launch of the report. Looking, forward to hearing reactions and questions on that. And once again, Sam, Cindy, Deborah, thank you so much for your time, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Rohit.
Thank you.
Hello.